everyone, online as well as in person. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the blind blogger, Maxwell Ivy, and this is the Accessibility Advantage, where I'm advocating for more inclusion of and accessibility for people with disabilities, or considering my guest today for people with different abilities by emphasizing communication and collaboration. You can find me at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. Just a short audio description. I am a older Caucasian male with short curly brown hair that has some gray and some white in it, brown eyes, wearing a white button-down dress shirt and a black tie. I am almost totally blind from retinitis pigmentosa or RP. And now I can get to my guest, who I've been having great conversations with over the last month. I feel like we're family by now. Her name is Missy Sue Mastel, or Masstel, and I'm going to call her Missy because she told me to. She is the CEO and founder of Masstel Communications, which helps nonprofits manage their financial arrangements. She is also the author of a new book, Generation Giving Back, helping people master the modern facets of a sustainable nonprofit. And you can find her at masstel.com, Masstel.com. So, Missy, thanks so much for joining me again today. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, me too. And you are correct. We've been able to have quite a few conversations this last month. And it's amazing what you do. So thank you so much for being around.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. One thing I'm really big on is telling others when they do something I appreciate. And so it's nice to hear that from my guest and my friend. So would you tell people a little bit about your background and your personal experience with disability?
Absolutely. So because I started out as an accountant, like so many people do and did. And I began as a normal CPA, like everyone else does, looking at for-profit organizations. And I quickly discovered that there just wasn't enough purpose in that for me. And I started working exclusively about 25 years ago with nonprofit organizations. We've raised quite a bit of money for nonprofits. And the number one lesson that I have for nonprofits, I think it's more than $300 million at this point. And I think the number one rule I have for them is to see themselves as valuable contributors to society, not to see themselves as looking for handouts, not to see themselves as trying to beg for money, but to understand their value, not just to the people who are receiving their programming and their services, but also to community at large and to other organizations as well. And that has led me into a real appreciation for people and I feel this way, with different abilities.
I wouldn't have you on here if you didn't. That wouldn't be any fun any other way. Just one quick comment. I love how you mentioned seeing their value, because that's become a big thing in the for-profit world as well. Seeing your value to your customers, to the world at large, and pricing based on values. So it's good that you're out there spreading this very important message among nonprofit organizations.
It's true, and I think what we need for-profit organizations to understand is the multi-capital market. Right? They can't survive thinking about profit and profit alone. And even the organizations that have, millions of stakeholders from all over the world who owns shares and who are looking at that earning per share number are now recognizing that it's a little empty, and they want to see something a little bit more meaningful. When we talk about legacy, we're not talking about how much money. We're talking about what did this corporation, what did this corpus of people put into the world that makes it a better place.
Yeah, and once before you actually explained to me that the word corporation has nothing to do with profit. It's a Greek or a Roman word that has more to do with people coming together for a purpose.
Right, absolutely. And corpus, which is the basis, same basis as corporation, is from body. It's people getting together to do good. That's exactly right, Max. You are A plus.
Well, being a good student is something I've been most of my life. Although sometimes sometimes my results were not as good as others because of a lack of good technology. Things have changed a lot from '84 to 2024.
And, technology has really made a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And in a lot of ways, it's leveled out some of the playing field. When we talk about people or organizations, so when we talk about people or organizations with different abilities, technology has really been able to create level playing fields. So you can get the best and the brightest ideas out, regardless of what people's personal or professional limitations and abilities are.
Right. So let's get to the main reason that I wanted to have you back again, because I did talk to you for Hearsay Shorts a while back, is let's talk about where the idea of differently able came from for you. I know it's not a new idea, it's been out there, but what brought it home to you where now it's the way you look at the world? And quite frankly, even if it makes some of y'all mad out there, it's the way I'm starting to look at the world, because I find in my life that I try to see the positives. I'm known for saying, if you don't ask, they can't say yes, where most people would say, well, if what's the worst that can happen? So I feel like you're differently able is much more positive and inclusive of people with disabilities or with different abilities and without. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you discuss and educate and maybe even entertain a little.
I hope to as well. Thank you. I think it's important for people to, as our world gets a little smaller and we encounter different kinds of people, right? It's not sufficient to be able to think about people as being abled or disabled. It's an inefficient construct that we've made up in order to sort of help ourselves understand what I will call limitations for the moment. But the fact is, it's not really limitations at all. The more we expand our perspective globally, and the more we get deeper into other people's stories, it's pretty easy to recognize that even people who we might have thought of as limited in some way or another have a very different and valuable perspective, right? And we are a better, not just a more inclusive, of course we're more inclusive, but we're actually we're better able to solve problems if we consider all of those perspectives. And so dealing with people who have historically considered themselves disabled has led me to understand that they really are people who have the most amazing skill set in navigating this world in a different way, right? And if
Yes,
I can
exactly.
bring my understanding to their perspective, we can create a better, certainly more inclusive, as I mentioned, but also just actually better planet and world that we live in. So
Yeah.
I have used historically differently abled rather than disabled because I feel like it's more representative of the fact that everyone has something to add.
Right. And the thing I've come to understand from having conversations with you about this is that differently abled can apply to everyone. At some point in someone's life, they're all potentially could have a different ability or be forced to create a different ability. And but disabled is other. It's different. You are not like everybody else. And I actually run into this when talking to businesses about accessibility. They think, well, I can't bring accessibility to my website because it's such a foreign topic. I don't know anything about it. And I like to tell them, well, how would you solve any other problem in your business? Then how would you solve accessibility? Take the same processes and apply them. So that's one of those areas where when I listen to you talk about differently able, I think, I've been using that model, whether I said those words or not.
That's exactly right. And I think that you bring up a really important point I don't want to gloss over, which is aging.
Oh, yes.
Even if we if we start thinking about disabled, and this is one of those areas where you just sort of, you create your own sort of false construct, because when we age, our abilities change, right? We can't go
Yes.
up a flight of stairs at the same pace. We can't see. We have to wear reading glasses. I have a pair of mine right here. My abilities have changed, right? And I
Yes.
can't do the same things. Even my driver's license says to me now that I need corrective lenses to drive. And
Mhm.
thank goodness it does, because nobody
Yes.
wants me driving with the idea that I had the same abilities when I was 20 as I do now. So nobody wants me on the road that way. You want me on the
Right.
road with my corrective lenses, right?
Yes.
For
Yeah.
everybody's safety. So, so,
Yeah.
so I am differently abled now than I was when I was 20. It's such a more inclusive environment because it says we recognize that changes happen and we recognize that people have different abilities, and we are able to create solutions, right? In some instances, like certainly corrective lenses, we get ourselves back to a place where we were before. But in all instances, we're able to use technology and opportunities to expand what we consider to be the marketplace, right, of our ideas and opinions.
Right. And when I think about aging, I think about some of the technology we have now in the area of smartphones, namely the Apple, iOS, and how when it was originally developed, it was developed to make it accessible to people who needed screen readers or magnification. But Steve Jobs didn't develop it for people with disabilities. He developed it for the aging population that he saw coming as all the millions of baby boomers started to get into their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he saw a business opportunity to take advantage of people becoming differently abled.
Exactly. What a perfect example, right? He made millions understanding that who you are in one phase of life is not who you are at another phase of life. And any aging baby boomer or Gen Xer who doesn't believe that their abilities are going to change is kidding themselves.
Yes. And of course, we're talking about, technology here. We're generally talking about high-tech technology. But one thing I talk about when I'm discussing employment of people with disabilities is how we have to become creative problem solvers, because in general, most people will not solve our problems for us, especially the smaller ones that be solved with low tech options. And I like to joke with friends that some days I feel like I have to be my own Einstein.
Right. Well, absolutely. I think we all, if we can get out of our own way, we can solve problems that are um, that that are really going to help a bunch of people. I mean, I think that's what living in community is really about. And when I say the word corporation or corpus, that's what I'm talking about, right? Is that when we solve problems for ourselves and we publicize them, we solve problems for other people as well, right? So you are
Yes.
your own Einstein. Einstein is his own Einstein, and each
Mhm.
of us has an Einstein within us.
Yes. Yeah. And I just last week there was a new book added to the National Library Services, 100 low-tech hacks for people living with disability. I thought, well, somebody's going to have a bestseller on ideas that I probably came up with.
I love that idea. I love, yeah, you should have written that one. Here's the good news, though. I don't know very many people who still read books like that.
Uh-huh.
Most people get most of their information from podcasts. So lucky you.
Lucky me. Yes, yes. So I think we understand the concept of differently able, and like I say, I am definitely coming around to seeing it mostly because it's more positive than the alternative of being disabled. So how do you address this with these corporations, these nonprofit organizations that you work with? How do you help them to understand the need for full inclusion of people with all the different abilities that they are going to come in contact with?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think for nonprofits, it's actually pretty easy in general. Nonprofits overall are an inclusive bunch, right?
Right.
Um, that being said, though, they tend to think of themselves as somehow less than for-profit organizations. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a nonprofit say to me, a person in a for-profit organization saying, "Oh, well, anyone can start a nonprofit," or it's they're working in a nonprofit because they couldn't make it in the, and I'm doing air quotes with my fingers now,
Way
the
to go.
real world.
Way to drop some audio description in there, girl.
Thank you, thank you. I am learning. So there's these air quotes, right? The real world. But the truth of the matter is that when nonprofits can, because of their abilities to see a larger perspective, have a lot of things that they can add to the for-profit organization, including this perspective on disabilities, right? They don't see differently abled people as an issue to solve. They see them as a perspective to engage. And that's how Steve Jobs saw it as well. Aging populations were not, they are a fait accompli. They're something that's happening. So we don't have the choice to say, oh, that's not happening, we'll find replacement people. The populations in most of the first world countries are aging. So it is not something to solve, it's something to embrace.
Okay.
And so for-profit organizations, when I go into them and I explain to them, right, that their nonprofit partners and their differently abled associates who can help them embrace that is a market that they need to be taking into consideration.
Yes. And I love talking to business owners about the fact that they're missing out on this market. And unfortunately, some of them still refuse to invest in the market. But the reason I asked you the question about nonprofits is in my mind, I was wondering, I would think that nonprofits, because they are issue and mission focused, would not have problems with accessibility and inclusion. But you actually know this area much better than anybody else I know. So I figured, why not ask the question and be sure that this isn't also a problem in the nonprofit world.
It can be, because when you're talking about markets, particularly larger markets, you need resources to help manage those. So what's very important, and what I find nonprofits really add a lot of value to, is making sure that they have those perspectives on their board in one way or another, that they're keeping their minds open to what the differently abled can add in. I think it's important for most nonprofits to find ways of inclusion, so that somebody on the board is watching out for those things. Otherwise, it can look like a drain on resources. And this goes back to my accounting moments, right? I find that metrics overall tell a different story than what people think the story is in their head, right? So
Yes.
a good accountant also will be able to help you understand who you really are serving, both when we talk about shareholders and multi-capital environments for profits and for nonprofits as well. So
Right. And
knowing who you're sharing is really key, who your market share is, who you're addressing in your solutions for or profit or nonprofit, really makes a big difference. And so including people of different abilities and aging, populations of different age groups and all of it is really important to be able to create the right mix of,
okay,
value.
now I'm gonna ask you a question that's been percolating in my brain. I've had conversations with other people who are disabled or differently able, depending on how they see themselves. I've had conversations about this. Don't have an answer, but I think differently abled might be the answer. Within the disability community, there are people who have a hearing disability, who are visually impaired, who are paraplegics or quadriplegics and have to use mechanical switch devices. There are people with neural developmental diseases. There are people with autism. we have so many different groups within the community. And y'all just can assume for the rest of this conversation, when I say community, I mean differently able community. Um, I wonder if we change that one bit of language, if maybe we could finally get the disability groups to communicate with each other, to collaborate more, and to work more together for advocacy, because quite often in my experience, there's a mindset of lack when it comes to any group that's advocating for different abilities.
I would say yes. I would say, please do not forget to put in the AARP in there, right?
Really,
I,
AARP.
I would say that people who are, that they also are an organization of people who are differently abled as they age. People have different abilities, and they might be really a great unifier for a lot of the organizations that you're talking about and a lot of the disabilities that you're talking about. Because again, even if you start out with all your faculties and all the senses that God possibly enabled you, eventually something will happen, and those faculties are going to change.
Yes, yeah. And it may not even be change in a negative way. You know, when we
Nope.
talk about changes, we assume it's lessening of abilities, but it could mean improvement of circumstances. It could mean that something in your life, personally or professionally, has gotten much better or much more taxing or much more enjoyable. And that has a change on you either physically or emotionally for the better.
Absolutely. I mean, let's not forget that that there's a good chunk of the population post-COVID that's living with intense amounts of anxiety,
Oh, yes.
right? And
Oh, yes. Yeah,
that
definitely. Before we started recording, I talked to you about my mom, who I believe some of the isolation from COVID is affecting her. And I don't feel like it's affected me much because I was kind of isolated before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID due to lack of good transit options out in my part of the city. But you're right. There are people who they've been away from the community of human beings so long that there's fear and anxiety in returning to doing their quote, air quotes, unquote, normal lives.
That's exactly right. And I think when we talk about enabling society, we can't forget any of these classes of people, any of these different abilities, because can I just say that the people who have autism or anxiety both benefit from a vibrant YouTube community,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
it's not like one solution can't work for a number. If people are putting their Einsteins together, one solution can work for multiple communities.
Well, actually, you're preaching to the choir here because one of the things I really, it's a pet peeve for me, is when someone tells a business owner that there's an improvement in accessibility, it has to be done my way or not at all. And so you're right. This collaboration among people with different abilities to either solve a problem or to find ways to make their lives on a daily basis more enjoyable is definitely it's a power, it's a force of energy that we really need to tap into more.
Yeah, and let's be clear, the consumer electronics groups and the consumer technology associations, they all know this, right? They
Mhm.
don't look at people with different abilities and say, we're not including them. They're looking at these organizations and saying, how can we include them?
Right. And I can't help but agree with you. Last year I was asked to do a product evaluation of Roku, and I was pleasantly surprised that it not only had accessibility features, but that they're available on every single unit that they've ever built. And there's a series of buttons you press to turn it on and off, and you can do that wherever you're at. And besides them and Apple, there really aren't a lot of companies that are making their accessibility feature where it's transferable and where it's easy to access no matter whose devices you're using. So I agree with you, and thanks for bringing that up about the technology world because they definitely don't want to leave anybody
Mm-mm.
out of the aisles.
That's right. And they know that you are consumers and decision makers. They're aware. And I think that and even, again, and again, when you look at like aging, you look at your mom, right? Or me. I know
Or
I'm
me, I'm
aging.
going to be 60 next year.
Well, congratulations. You should never regret birthdays. The alternatives are not good.
Yes, the alternative to growing old is not good.
That's right. That's right. So that's wonderful. And I think so I think they are really starting to pay attention. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. I will say that for the nonprofit organizations who have who are looking for ways of how to build their market share, build their marketplace, or raise awareness, this is an excellent opportunity. And they can talk to me anytime or read Generation Giving Back, whatever it is, it'll help them get underway with that.
You know, you are a well-trained guest. I was just about to ask you to talk about Generation Giving Back, and please give the full correct title because I know I butchered it.
No, are you kidding? I like your title, I think, even better than mine. Modern Facets of a Sustainable Nonprofit. I think I even like that better. But our subtitle, it's Generation Giving Back, and our subtitle is about, talks about the different things that you need in order to be a really significant nonprofit, how really to sort of create space for the good that you want to see in the world. And yeah, so it's an important book, I think, because it says, hey, the world's changing, and it certainly is. And the way that we are looking at community and at support is changing. And I don't want nonprofits to feel like they're out there begging for money, right? The
Right,
idea of nonprofits as a charity is a little outdated, right? A nonprofit is a service of value to the community that the rest of the corporation, the rest of our society needs in order to function.
right.
And if they don't see their value, then we need to figure out a way for them to not just see their value, but demonstrate it to the other organizations, other corporations in the world as well.
Right. And that's one last thing I wanted to ask you about your book. I think it's very important that your book appears to have a section on KPI, which for y'all, that's key performance indicators. Because as you mentioned earlier, a lot of times we can feel we're doing okay, but without ways to really monitor what we're doing versus what our goals were, we're not able to be sustainable, are we?
That's right. That's right. You need to have a theory of change, and you need to be able to record what you're doing in the world. So I'm 100% behind that. Max, if you ever need a job, let me know.
Well, I'm always open to extra work. Just we can talk about that later. And that's one of the really cool things about podcasting and video. And you mentioned this earlier, so it's kind of a natural follow up here for me. Is that a lot of people, when they do a podcast interview, whether they're the host or the guest, they think, okay, I'm going to go on here, I'm going to talk about my stuff, I'm going to promote myself, and I'm going to leave. But the real fun is when you can have a pre-interview and then you can have an actual interview and you can make a connection with the guest or the host to the point where when it's over with, this is a beginning, not an ending.
That's right. But Max, you are particularly personable, so it's pretty easy to make a connection with you.
I appreciate that. I do my best to be the kind of friend I want other people to be,
Amen.
and I think I can either credit or blame some of those 15 or 20 years I spent dragging a 7-ride carnival around the country. So I really do appreciate you talking with me again.
Anytime.
What would your final words be for our audience? And maybe you could split it up into nonprofit and for profit. Maybe have two thoughts, and then mention your website again.
Sure, but I don't think I'm gonna break it up because I think
Okay, all right.
my idea is, I think it's universal.
Okay,
Here's what
good.
I would say, and I learned it I sit on a board here in San Francisco called the Community Home Rise Project, or Community Home Rise, which works with affordable housing. And one of the board members told me once that the past gets a vote, not a veto. And that means that regardless of how you've done or what you've done in the past, it's no reason to continue doing it the same way or doing the same thing just because you've always done it. It's important how you've always done it, but invite new thoughts, invite new perspectives, invite your differently abled friends, invite their ideas and their concepts and their connections, because it's a new opportunity for you. And then my website is www.masstel.com. My book's available on Amazon, and I'm really looking forward to everything that you do and everything that we can do together to make the world a better place for the differently abled, for the disabled, and for everyone else too.
Yes, I appreciate that's a great way to end, talking about opportunity and including everyone. And I've, you know, I can't tell you how much you have changed the way that I see the world as a result of having these conversations with you. So I really appreciate you coming back on
Too sweet.
the accessibility advantage. And for y'all out there, my website is theaccessibilityadvantage.com. My primary social media network is linkedin.com/in/Maxwell Ivy. And there's an E in the word Ivy. My guest today has been Missy Sue Mastel of Masstel Communications, Masstel.com. And I just want y'all to, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I hope that it's changed, or at least started you on the process of reconsidering how you think about people who are disabled or differently abled. And I hope you will join me next time on the Accessibility Advantage. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is.